Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a really significant event, something I'm sure a lot of you, especially those prepping for the UPSC, are already looking into. It's the hijacking of that passenger train in Pakistan. Just a few days ago, March 11th.
Yeah, a really tragic situation. Balochistan Liberation Army, the BLA, stopping a train going from Quetta to Peshawar.
Over 380 passengers, can you imagine?
Absolutely. And the rescue operation the next day, on March 12th, well, it didn't end peacefully. 64 deaths reported, including, sadly, 33 of the militants.
It certainly sparked a lot of discussion, hasn't it? I mean, within Pakistan, in their media, about the whole issue of terrorism they've been dealing with for so long.
It's a complex issue, and for our listeners, especially you UPSC aspirants, really dissecting the immediate reactions and analysis you see in Pakistani media, it can be hugely insightful. I mean, it gives you such a unique perspective on how a nation grapples with these kinds of crises, The challenges, the potential responses, it's all there.
Right. And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We've been poring over articles and editorials from some of Pakistan's leading newspapers, the Daily Times, Dawn, The Nation, Pakistan Observer. We're talking March 13th, 14th, 15th publications. And what we really want to do is unpack the major themes that have emerged.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so where do we start? Well, one theme that really jumps out is this idea of looking inwards. Trying to understand what's happening within Pakistan itself that contributes to these sorts of attacks.
Definitely. There's this strong current running through a lot of these pieces that Pakistan has to really confront its own internal dynamics. Like, take Saad Massoud's piece in the Daily Times, March 15th. He makes a strong case about what he calls a lack of resolve from the government.
And he doesn't just criticize, right? He actually offers a specific strategy, doesn't he?
Right. He talks about this approach of assimilating where possible and eliminating where needed. It's an interesting counterinsurgency policy, tries to find a balance between security measures and, efforts to integrate.
It sounds almost inspired by, wasn't it Colombia, their approach to dealing with insurgents?
Exactly. Massoud brings up Colombia's experience and how they've focused on investing in the areas hit hardest by conflict, creating jobs, promoting stability. He sees that as key, a long-term solution that goes beyond just military action.
It's a good point. I mean, think about it. Sustainable solutions, that's what's needed. And then there's Asim Sajjad Akhtar, his piece in Dawn, March 14th, takes a bit of a different angle. He kind of argues that the Balochistan issue is often neglected until something like this train hijacking happens, something big and tragic.
And it's not just Balochistan, is it? Akhtar connects it to a wider problem in Pakistan.
A crisis of hegemony, he calls it, affecting other regions like Sindh, Gilgit-Baltistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the Peshawar Valley. It's like there's this pattern of what he calls repression and resource grabs that just keeps fueling tensions and resentment.
And he really goes after these, what does he call them, vanity development projects, right?
Those big, flashy projects that might look good on paper but end up displacing local communities, breeding more anger, especially among young people who feel left out.
Yeah, his conclusion is pretty powerful. He calls for a progressive alternative and a whole new social contract that truly acknowledges Pakistan's diverse multinational makeup.
It's like he's saying that recognizing this diversity is key to tackling the xenophobia that seems to be on the rise. Big ask. Structural reform.
And it's interesting, The Nation, in their editorial on March 13th, they pick up on this whole idea of needing to look inward. They actually point to something positive coming out of this awful attack. They talk about how it sparked what they call a long overdue national conversation.
They even mention key players getting involved, right? The Prime Minister, the Chief of Army Staff, everyone's talking about these critical issues in Balochistan.
But they also warn that this can't be a one-off conversation,
Wow.
It has to be sustained, has to lead to real action.
Absolutely. Identifying the problem is one thing. Actually doing something about it is quite another. Okay, so we've got this perspective of looking inward. But then there's the other side of the coin, this idea of a foreign hand being responsible. And, well, we've already seen the Pakistani military and government pointing fingers, specifically at India's involvement in this train hijacking.
It's a familiar refrain, unfortunately, and unsurprisingly, it's echoed in some of the Pakistani media coverage. There's a real focus on India and Afghanistan.
For instance, Dawn's editorial on March 14th, they straight up allege Indian involvement in stirring up trouble in Balochistan. They even bring up the Kobushan Jahav case and that dossier Pakistan submitted to the UN. as evidence of India meddling in the region.
They seem pretty disappointed, like India should know better, should act more responsibly.
And it's not just India, right? They also bring up the Taliban in Afghanistan, accusing them of harboring anti-Pakistan terrorists.
Yeah, specifically naming TTP, the Taliban Pakistan, and the BLA. They make it pretty clear that any improvement in relations with Afghanistan hinges on them taking action against these groups operating on their soil. It's a pretty strong stance.
And Malik Mohammed Ashraf, in his piece in The Nation on March 14th, he really hammers this international dimension home. He says the attack proved beyond any doubt this external link, even mentioning alleged communication between the terrorists and handlers in Afghanistan.
Interesting, though, that he seems to zero in on Afghanistan, unlike Dawn, who kind of spread the blame between India and Afghanistan. It just goes to show the different angles even within this foreign hand narrative.
Okay, so we've looked at internal reflection, external blame. What else is there? Well, there's a huge emphasis on the need for national unity in the wake of this tragedy. Everyone seems to agree Pakistan needs to stand together.
It's that classic call for a unified response after a tragedy. Like in The Nation's editorial on March 14th, they acknowledge how divided Pakistan is politically. They say it's hard to even imagine the government and opposition having a rational conversation, but they still say unity is absolutely crucial right now.
And then the Pakistan Observer on March 15th, they talk about Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's move to convene an all-parties conference. They see it as a good first step towards building a national consensus on how to tackle this threat. But they also add a caveat.
Preparation, right. They say it can't just be a symbolic gesture. It needs to be well-planned to actually get something done.
Makes sense. You can't just have unity for the sake of unity. There has to be a purpose, a plan. And this kind of brings us full circle back to Saad Massoud's piece in the Daily Times. He ties this idea of winning the peace with the Baloch rebels to achieving genuine national unity.
He talks about a unified Pakistan where everyone feels represented and valued. Like addressing the root causes of the insurgency is not just about security. It's about building a truly inclusive national identity.
So, taking a step back and looking at all these different perspectives from the Pakistani press, it's clear this train hijacking has revealed just how complicated and layered the situation is.
It's like this constant push and pull between looking inward at the root causes and looking outward, assigning blame. And then this overarching need for national unity, even with all the political division.
And for our listeners, especially those preparing for the UPSC, this is gold, right? You're getting a front row seat to how a nation's media grapples with a major security challenge. You see the narratives, the proposed solutions. This is the kind of critical analysis that's so valuable. Understanding the nuances, the assumptions, the potential biases, it's all there.
Couldn't agree more. Multiple sources, rigorous analysis, it's all part of the process.
So as you think about all this, what do you see as most critical factor for achieving lasting stability in the region? Is it about internal reform, external diplomacy, or forging that much-needed national consensus within Pakistan?
Some really tough questions to ponder.
If you found this deep dive helpful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth analyses. And if you have any questions or thoughts, leave us a comment. We love hearing from you. Today, we drew on a range of articles and editorials from Pakistani newspapers like the Daily Times, Dawn, The Nation, and the Pakistan Observer, all published between March 13th and 15th. Of course, there's always more to learn, so definitely check out other sources like the Indian Express for more context. Thanks for joining us and keep exploring these crucial issues.